Hey, I'm Jenna Wolf, certified lactation counselor, parent coach, and extended breastfeeding mom of two. I fully understand the unique challenges of breastfeeding beyond the baby days, and I'm here to take your hand and support you along your journey. So toss that hair in a messy bun, grab a basket of laundry to fold, and let's get started. This is Start to Stop Toddler Breastfeeding.
I wanted to talk about tantrums today. Toddler tantrums, when you're breastfeeding, when you're weaning. And I asked all of you a few days ago on Instagram what you wanted to talk about in relation to this topic. And nighttime feeds and night weaning was the response that I got from all of you. So that's what we're talking today. We're talking tantrums, but we're talking night weaning and how they coincide and what to do when your toddler is tantruming while you're night weaning. And I get it. It feels like everything is just so much more intense at nighttime, and that makes sense. That being said, all of this conversation is really applicable to daytime stuff too. So even if you have already night weaned or you're not planning on night weaning for a while, stay tuned. There's going to be things in here that will absolutely support you no matter where you're at in your parenting, really. So let me just start with painting a little picture for all of you. Imagine in your mind's eye that the day has finally come. You've had this marked on your calendar for a while. You've been reading all the blogs about night weaning a toddler. You've purchased all the weaning stories off of Amazon. Maybe you even had a special dinner and dessert in preparation for your toddler's first night mommy milk free, right? You've been having this conversation. You're making it special. They know what's going down. You know what's going down. You've breastfed your little one to sleep, reminding them that this will be the last time they have milk until the sun shines. Then you enjoyed a movie on the couch with your partner and crashed into bed at 11 p.m. I know, maybe 11 p.m. is super late for you. Maybe it's super early. I don't know, but go with it for a moment. So you finally fell asleep at 11, or maybe you fell asleep early at 11, and now it is 12:13 in the morning, and you are sitting up in bed groggy with your 2-year-old protesting your refusal to breastfeed. Your offer of a snuggle is just not cutting it, right? Now, I just want to say that I do have my free guide to saying no to the feed while still saying yes to the need. If you don't even know how to say no, if that's even a struggle for you, you can go grab that at ownyourparentingstory.com/guide. I won't be covering that stuff in this episode, but that's there for you. So you're sitting up in bed groggy. Your 2-year-old is not okay with the fact that you have said they cannot breastfeed. What thoughts are going through your head? Let me know, or, pretend you can let me know. I wish that there was a way you could talk back to me on the podcast, but let me know if these ring a bell. Thoughts like, OMG, you are way too old for this. Stop acting like a baby. Or do not give in. You're just going to reinforce this bad behavior. So just whatever you do, do not give in. Or ignore it. They're just looking for attention. Just ignore the tantrum. Or you can go into the, full kind of self-attack mode, the woe is me mode of why I did everything right. Why is it always my kid? Why is it always me that has to go through these difficult things? Or just the straight up, I cannot handle this. I am done. Now, I have absolutely had all of those thoughts, so that's why I'm writing them down. But those thoughts are often followed by some actions. Do you walk away and ignore them? Try and distract them with a food or story. Just tell them straight up stop, using phrases like maybe put your tears away, this is not a time for crying. Or maybe you threaten to take away something that they care about or something that is valuable to them. No more TV in the morning, or you're not going to have that special breakfast cereal. You can remind them perhaps of a reward that you've been planning if they don't breastfeed tonight, right? If you don't breastfeed tonight, then you're going to get XYZ. Or, the default of scream right back at them because they just know how to push your buttons, right? And you are beyond your capacity to handle this. Okay, back to reality. If, like I said, you're anything like me, you've probably had or done any number of those things. But the truth is that none of those are going to serve you or your child well in the moment or long term, and they're definitely not going to get you any more sleep tonight. In this podcast episode, I'm going to be covering a number of things big picture stuff about night weaning, some of the in-the-moment tantrum strategies. And at the end, I'm going to be sharing my best tip. And I am putting tip in quotes because it's kind of not a tip, but it's good for night weaning. So stick around for that. And I have a blog post that covers all of this stuff too. That link is in the show notes as well. So you can go grab that if you'd prefer to read this, or you want to share it with, your partner or a friend, and a blog post is just easier for you. So before we get started into mitigating and managing all of those toddler behaviors at nighttime, you have to understand what those behaviors are and what's happening. Really, for all humans, there are at least 2 different types of behaviors. Dr. Mona Delahooke breaks them into these 2 categories: top-down behaviors and bottom-up behaviors. So each type of behavior results from a different part in the brain, and they have a different motivation and intention with them. And you need different supports for managing them. So we have top-down and bottom-up. So bottom-up behaviors are instinctual and unintentional. Okay. It doesn't mean that there's not ever a thought, as if it's like completely outside of your control, but to an extent it is, right? There might be some thought that comes with it, but for the most part, it's being driven by these body sensations in your body and by parts of the brain that are not involved with logic and reasoning and conscious thought and control. So bottom-up behaviors are often stress responses, and their purpose and their intention is for survival. These are, really about focusing on that here and now sensations in the body, and you're really being driven to them. This is like when you run away from a large dog that is barking and running towards you, right? You don't really think about it. You just start running. Human infants only have bottom-up behaviors. They don't have any top-down behaviors. And toddlers are just beginning to be able to have top-down behaviors, which we're going to talk about in a second. But when they get stressed, they're going to move into bottom-up behaviors. So top-down behaviors are intentional and deliberate. This is like when my kids will push a chair over to the pantry and grab the chocolate chips off of the top shelf of the pantry while I'm in the bathroom, right? These are often experiments and driven by curiosity. And they're not always negative, nor is it always about pushing the limits or pushing the boundaries. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is like a testing the water or, seeing what's going to happen, but there's intention behind it. It's really an experiment, and it's an exploration. They're doing something to see what will happen, right? And so sometimes it's something that they know they shouldn't be doing. Sometimes. And sometimes it's simply like, oh, what will happen if, right? When you are night weaning a toddler, a challenging top-down behavior that you might experience is something like when they are sneakily kind of sliding their hand up your shirt, to have access when you've told them not to, right? So that would be a top-down behavior. They're not in distress. They're thinking about it. They're exploring. They're testing the limit a little bit. And this is an opportunity for you to use logic and reasoning as well, because that is what they are using. They are actually using the part of their brain, which is still in very much its infancy. These are emerging skills, okay? This kind of logic and reasoning and thinking about things. So, but you can use that when they're in that state. They have access to that part of their brain. So you can say, oh, I see those little fingers. Hey, what's happening here, sweetie? Oh, I know. You really want to have a drink of milk. I get it. You're going to have some in the morning. And you can offer a choice here. Would you like to snuggle like this? Would you like to do that? Can I rub your back? You can offer that kind of response in those moments. You might just find it easiest to kind of turn them around so that they are facing away from you and kind of snuggle them from behind. Sometimes that can be helpful. You know your child best, what kind of things they like. So you can absolutely do that when they're in that top-down behavior mode, right? This is not stress. Now, they might be sliding their hands up out of stress, in which case you're going to feel rapid heart rate. They're going to be in a state of distress, right? Like they are going to be stressed in that moment. So those bottom-up behaviors, when they're in that state of stress, require a completely different approach. You cannot use logic and reasoning for bottom up behaviors because that part of their brain is offline. They don't have access to use their logic and reasoning skills in those moments. All humans experience moments like that when you cannot use logic and reasoning to support them. It's just not going to serve you. It's not going to serve them. And it's just problematic. So, what can you do for these more stressful moments? Well, first, let's zoom out and take a big picture look at night weaning in general and what has led you to this moment. What has been happening during the day before night weaning? All of that kind of stuff. So think about just for a moment, if you were about to embark on a big project at work, you've been given a big opportunity and you're super excited about it and you know that it's going to challenge you and you're really excited to see what you can do with it, right? But if you've been sick for 2 weeks and your partner's out of the country for a month and your neighbor decided to practice the drums at 2 a.m. and you have a new boss that doesn't like you, the challenging aspects of that project are going to be exhausting, right? Instead of exhilarating. And it's likely that you're going to struggle to get it completed. And probably, even if you do get it completed, it's not going to be done well, nor to the, standards that you originally thought it could, right? Like really to your potential. So the same is true for your child. Night weaning is a new challenge. And even if they're ready for it, other variables can make that challenge stressful instead of manageable. Okay? There's a sweet spot. There's a zone that you can be in where a new challenge is manageable and feels good and you can do it. And even if it doesn't always feel good, even if you're pushing yourself through it, you know that you can do this, right? And then there are challenges that are too much. It's too big for you right now. And a lot of times that doesn't have to do with the challenge itself. It has to do with other stressors in your life. So the first consideration that I would offer you when we're looking at the big picture things around night weaning is your why. I know I talk about your why a lot, and sometimes there's a misconception here that I am telling you that you need to find a why that is good enough. And that is not the case. Your why is important because it is your compass. It is your arrow. There are so many different whys for night weaning that your why is going to be different from somebody else's why. Maybe not every single person is going to have a unique one, but there are so many of them that we cannot use a one-size-fits-all approach here. And your why is going to point out what your needs are. So if you are night weaning because you're pregnant and you're sore and it's difficult to breastfeed at night, that's different than the person who's night weaning because they have a trip coming up. That's also different from the person who's night weaning because they're not getting enough sleep. It's also different from a person who's night weaning because their pediatrician or their family members have told them that they should night wean, right? All different scenarios here. And when you're looking at your why, you have an opportunity to consider what things you can do, what changes you can make outside of night weaning to better support yourself. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't night wean. It just means that you can show up in the night weaning experience with less stress yourself, right? Because when you're putting everything on night weaning, that's going to solve all the problems and that's going to make everything better. Then when there is pushback, it feels so intense because it's like everything's riding on this. This is so, so important. But if you can take that moment and zoom out, then you can say, okay, what kind of things can I shift around in my day so that I can show up fully or at least more, right, to the best of my ability at night and have the resources I need for this challenge to be manageable for me, right? Because it's also a challenge for you too, right? So start with your why. Consider what options you have available to you outside of night weaning. Make some shifts there so that you can show up at the night weaning with a bigger capacity, to support your child. Okay. Then also consider your toddler's daytime needs. So things like nutrition, movement, connection, all of these things are important to be meeting during the day so that your child, again, has more capacity, has more internal resources to show up for this new challenge at nighttime. Little things during the day can add up, and they could be making what Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett would be calling withdrawals from a body budget, right? So your child has internal resources inside of them. And if there's a lot of withdrawals, if there's a lot of things that are kind of taking from them and they're not getting a lot of things put back in, when there's a new challenge presented, like night weaning, it can simply be too much for them. And even if night weaning, like before your night weaning, everything's okay, it seems all right, sometimes night weaning is enough to tip them into the everything is not okay zone. And it's just going to make things a lot more stressful for you. It's also important to note that sometimes kids are kind of holding it together during the day, and then they are getting that input that they need to make it through the day at nighttime, right? They're getting more milk, they're getting more connection, they're getting more touch, all of that kind of stuff. So taking that away is not just presenting them with a new challenge of night weaning, but it's also kind of removing some of the resources that they've had to manage and live their life well, right, during the day. So take a look at the big picture stuff. Take a look at all of their needs during the day. Are there other things that can be adjusted, maybe some additional stressors that can be removed for a week before you night wean to allow them to be able to show up for this new challenge in a better state, right, with less stress? And then another thing, a big picture consideration would be the bedtime routine. I am not one to say that a bedtime routine is going to fix all of your sleep problems. That's not true. But sometimes if there's been needs that have kind of been missed during the day or deficits, areas where your child's been stretched a little thin, you can make up for that a little bit with a good bedtime routine or adding those things into the bedtime routine to support them. Things like connection, things like some movement, some sensory input, like a bath at bedtime. All of those things can help to kind of fortify your child's resources so that when they show up to that challenge of night weaning, they're able to do it a little bit better, right? I don't even want to use the word better, but they're able to manage it a little more effectively during that time, cope with it a little better. So even a snack, right, at bedtime, that kind of stuff. And the actual time when you're going to sleep is important too. You don't want to pick a time when your child is not tired. You also don't want to pick a time when your child is too sleepy, because if they're too sleepy, then you've got excess cortisol and adrenaline keeping them awake, right? That overtired kind of state. And that's going to be all the more stressful during the middle of the night, right? Something else to consider for big picture considerations would be the sleep environment. This is things like the temperature of the air, how much blue light is in the room, or how much blue light they had for the first few hours before they went to bed, sounds that might be waking them up. All of those things can be adding additional stressors and increasing that likelihood of bottom-up behaviors, right? Of stress responses in the middle of the night. But if they're managed well, they can also be supporting rest, right? Facilitating deeper rest and increasing your child's ability to show up with logic in the middle of the night as opposed to stress responses. Another thing to consider is medical considerations. So your child might be waking well above the average norm for their age. In episode 31 of my podcast, which is the episode right before this, I interviewed Kim Holly, who is a holistic sleep coach, and we talked about what is normal at different stages. In that show notes, I also linked to her blog that goes through all the different developmental stages up until age 5 and what is typical. If your child is falling outside of that range, it might be worthwhile talking to your doctor about possibly an iron deficiency or sleep disordered breathing or a different medical condition that might be going on and contributing to your child's night waking. And if your child is waking a lot to breastfeed overnight, they might be using breastfeed to cope with that medical condition, right? With that deficit that they're having in another area. And so removing the breastfeeding is actually removing a tool that they're using to cope and manage, right? So you might find that in those conditions, in those situations, when you remove the breastfeed, you're actually making things worse. And the last thing that you can consider when you are talking about night weaning is the pace of the night weaning. There is no perfect age or stage to night wean, no guaranteed window of readiness that will magically ensure your child stops asking and never complains again. That is a lie if somebody tells you that. I would say that it's not great to night wean before the age of 12 months, and even 18 months is a little bit better because they have a little bit more resources available to them to cope and to communicate, and they're able to understand a little bit more so it can go a little more smoothly for you. I also want to remind you that some families wean during the day long before they night wean, and you can absolutely breastfeed to sleep at the beginning of the night and even sometimes throughout the night, but not all the time. It is never all or nothing. I promise you. I don't have the time to get into why that is at this exact moment, but I promise you that is true. So, what you need to consider, though, with pacing the night weaning is that if you go too quickly, you will be putting stress on yourself and your child. And that stress can intensify the difficult emotions. So even if you have really floppy boobs and your toddler only ever latches for a few minutes at a time, maybe 4 times a day for 5 minutes, you can still be producing quite a bit of milk. A lot of times parents think, I'm not producing anything. But that might not be true. Sometimes toddlers can be getting 3-4 ounces or more in that quick 5-minute feed or less, like less time-wise. And if you rapidly reduce the amount of milk that you are producing, you're actually rapidly reducing hormones in your body, feel-good hormones like oxytocin. And when those things drop quickly, you can be putting yourself at risk for some mental health struggles, like post-weaning depression, which is absolutely a real thing. So you need to consider that for yourself. You also need to consider that your child might be getting a lot more nutrition from that breast milk than you realize, and taking away a chunk of that nutrition quickly will result in a hangry toddler, which is not super fun in the middle of the night. And going a little slower allows their bodies to recalibrate and adjust their eating and their expectations, right? So they can take in a little bit more calories during the day. This is not something you can force on them during the day because their bodies know what they need. We want them to follow their hunger and fullness cues. So when we go slowly, their bodies will have time to adjust and say, oh yeah, we're not getting those calories overnight anymore. We need to get those calories in during the day. All right, that was all the big picture considerations. Now it's time for some in the moment strategies for toddler tantrums at nighttime. Step 1, be gentle with yourself. Okay, so self-compassion is really, really important here. For a moment, imagine you've just come home from work and you've had a really awful day. You open the door, you drop your bags on the floor, and you're simultaneously ready to punch a hole in the wall and burst into tears. You look up and you see your partner standing there with a glass of wine or whatever is very comforting for you and a reassuring look of empathy. And they just go, looks like you have had a day. Then imagine you open the door, drop your bags on the floor, ready to punch the hole in the wall, burst into tears, and you look up and you hear your partner is just completely exasperated, and they take a breath in and they go, oh my God, are you serious? You're stressed out again? Can't you get your act together? Can't you just talk to your boss? Like, I don't need to be dealing with this right now. It has been a hard day here, and I don't have time for this. In the first situation, your partner was calm and their body and mind were in a regulated state, and they were able to share their calm with you. That evening likely ended with you having a game plan for the next day. What do I need to do? How can I feel good about going back to work tomorrow or maybe quitting? I don't know. But in the second situation, when they were super stressed out, they didn't have the capacity to meet you where you were, right? And they might have had very good reasons for being stressed out. Who knows? But that night probably ended with a lot more screaming and tears, or perhaps just the awkward and scary, awful silence than either of you wanted. You have the ability to offer your child calm too. Even if things are hard for you, and even if you have a reason to be stressed out too, you can. Some body-based ways to calm yourself in that moment would be taking 3 to 5 slow, deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. And just make sure that those out breaths are longer than the in breaths. You can also try something called havening. This is where you gently rub your arms with your hands kind of like up and down slowly, and you just notice that sensation on your skin. It can be a great way to regulate and calm your body. You can also use some brain-based ways to calm yourself. Self-compassion. Talk to yourself like you were talking to a best friend who was in the situation you were in. Oh man, that's so tough. It makes so much sense that this is stressful right now. You really want to be a good mom, and you also need sleep. You can also use a brain-based way to calm yourself by reminding yourself that your child is still really young and they're doing the best that they can too. So once you've got yourself a little more calm, Now you can ride the waves with your child. This is co-regulation. Just like your compassionate or the compassionate look from your partner helped you to feel better. Offering your child some compassion, being there with them, can help them to feel better too. Stay close. Let them know that you love them. Tell them that you see how hard this is for them. These big feelings that they're having, in the same way that when you walk through the door after a hard day and it just feels overwhelming, and even just that feeling is scary, that feeling can be scary for them too. So tell them, remind them, this is a storm, it's going to pass, right? And that you're going to be right there beside them through the whole thing, riding that wave with them. Okay, so step 3 would be checking for practical needs. In the moment strategy, when you're dealing with a meltdown, a tantrum in the middle of the night, when you're night weaning, there might be some big picture stuff that comes into play here. They might be hungry. They might be thirsty. They might need you to turn on a fan or off a fan. These things are simple but practical. And if they need it to happen, right? I'm not saying to throw everything at them and to just try all the things. But if there's something there that's actually adding to their stress, removing that stressor can be a great way to alleviate the intensity around this tantrum. And then the last thing that I would support you to do when you are dealing with a tantrum in the moment is to track the tears. So this comes from Dr. Gordon Neufeld's research. When you are accepting change, when you're accepting that there's something here that I cannot do anything about, things are changing, it's normal and healthy for there to be tears. Mad tears, tears of anger and frustration will melt into sad tears eventually. And eventually those sad tears will result in acceptance. They are going to know and accept that they're not going to be breastfeeding at night anymore, and they're okay. It's going to feel like relief to them. I know I'm here. I know you're here with me, Mom. We're going to be okay. And isn't that a skill that all humans really need? I don't think I was given that as a child, how to handle disappointment, how to handle change, right? It felt overwhelming to me. It felt like this is never going to end and I'm always going to feel terrible. But knowing that you can get through that and accept it at the end and come out with a sense of relief and empowerment is a skill and a beautiful skill and gift that you're offering your child in those moments. But be aware that if it's not mad and frustrated tears or sad tears, it could be complete stress tears that are survival tears. And this happens when, we're talking about that challenge, right? That challenge is simply too much for your child. This is beyond just I'm mad right now or I'm sad. This is hysterical, okay, where they cannot calm down. This could lead to vomiting, that kind of stuff. If this is the case, you need to stop. Okay? Do whatever you can to calm your child down and breastfeed them if that's okay. Like, there's no shame here in breastfeeding your child when they're that upset. You are not moving backwards in your weaning process. In fact, if you try to stick it out at this point of that intensity, it's going to get worse. It's going to make night weaning harder. So breastfeeding in that moment will support your child to calm down, and it's going to give you the time and space that you need to go back to those big picture considerations and say, okay, why is my child not able to cope with this right now? Are there other stressors? Are there other things we can add into their day to fortify and give them the resources and capacity they need in order to handle this new change at night? And give it a little time, okay? A couple weeks, work that through, settle it out, support them, be there with them, and get some support for yourself if you need it too, of course. And then come back to it. All right. This is an opportunity. I have obviously my big group coaching program, but you can work with me one-on-one. I do 45-minute mini toddler consults, and that link is all on my website and everything. So if you want to do that, reach out. I'm super happy to help out and help you navigate what might be happening there that you need to reassess in order to move forward with night weaning. So here is my best tip for night weaning a toddler. This applies to both you and your child, and it's actually a quote from Emily and Amelia Nagoski's book, Burnout. When you think you need more grit, what you really need is help. When you think you need persistence, what you really need is kindness. Now, they were not talking about night weaning a toddler or even parenting, but they were talking about managing stress. Help and kindness are what you need to navigate night weaning, and it's also what your child needs too. Okay, so get the supports that you need. You need to be able to show up in that night weaning journey and experience at your full capacity, right? So do what you need to in order to do that and support your child to be in that same state as well. All right. Like I said, I have a blog post with all of this stuff, and there's a few extra FAQs at the end of that blog post. You can go check it out if you would like to. It's linked in the show notes. It has been wonderful chatting with you this week. I am super excited to talk with you again next week. And as always, reach out to me on Instagram if you would like to continue this conversation, or if you have some questions, let me know what resonated with you. Maybe there's something you didn't like about it. Let me know. And you can always hit subscribe or follow. Just turn on your notifications on whatever podcast player you are listening to this to on so that you don't miss an episode.
If you loved this episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss any episodes in the future. Also, check out my breastfeeding toddler communication guide and cheat sheet to learn how to say no to the feed while still saying yes to the need at www.ownyourparentingstory.com/guide. And that concludes another episode of Start to Stop Toddler Breastfeeding. The theme song is Little Balloon by Jenny and Tyler, and it has been a pleasure to share this time with you. I'll catch you in the next episode.